What's up guys, Samson Sound with EDMProd here, and today we're talking all about field recordings. So yes, birds, rivers, streams, anything out in nature, but really anything outside of the studio in general, around your house. If you want more organic sounding productions and want to really bring things to life with some nice natural textures, why not just start recording everything around you and bring that inspiration back into the studio, right? And you can get really good sounds with just an iPhone. This is not so much a tutorial on the different field recording setups, but more so why you should use these types of sounds in electronic music. Now, last thing I'll mention, if you haven't joined our EDMProd mastermind community, definitely hop in there and more information is on that below. So putting field recordings in your tracks, guys, can really be just a very effortless way to just instantly bring things to life. So I've got some strings and a pad here, for example. And now I'm going to add some rain and soft waves to that. And so right off the bat, it just puts us into a different space, right? We're now listening, instead of in a soundproofed room, listening to strings and a pad, we're on the shores of an ocean, right? And it just adds so much texture and kind of puts us in a little bit of a different mind space. And so you could even, if you want, have an entire intro be a field recording, right? If we just soloed the rain and the waves. You know, maybe just let the listener vibe for a bit before hitting them with some of your ideas. And so it can be a great way, right? If you're stuck in like breaks or intros or outros, just throw in something you recorded outside the studio, right? Maybe you were sitting around the campfire and you just pressed record and got some, funny things that your friend said. Maybe put that in the outro of your track if it fits the vibe, right? So it's a good way to add character. And there's a lot you can do that we're going to go into detail later. This is an old track called Morning Dove that I released a few years ago. And so this features a morning dove bird chirp. And I'll show you guys how to isolate certain things from field recordings for either using as one-shots or layers. So right here I have just like a serum melody, and then the bird chirp is kind of the response to that melody. So there's really so many possibilities. It's not like you have to use, a field recording in one or two certain ways. You can use it as layers. You can use it for resampling. You could, I think I didn't use it in this track, but I have an impact here where I layered up some of those waves from Lake Ontario, and I initially was going to start the track with an impact. So it's going to give you very natural, organic sounding characters because it's, of course, sounds from the real world, right? Field recordings are also great because they can trigger very powerful, very deeply rooted human emotions, right? So, we've all gone outside on a summer's day and heard this. Right? Reminds me of childhood a little bit, or just good daytime vibes versus some thunder booms. And so we can use this to our advantage to create extra emotion, right? Keeping in mind that, humans evolved on the different biomes of Earth over many years and have a very visceral response to some of these sounds can be useful. So I have an ambient guitar loop here from one of our freebie packs. It's, if you want to go on the EDMProd site, on the freebies section, it is the ambient pack. I got a little guitar loop, and I'm just going to pair it first with the cicadas, and then second with the thunder booms. And to me, it feels like almost two completely different tracks going very different directions, but let me know if you agree. Now the thunder booms. So the first one to me has a much more uplifting vibe. It kind of sounds like the intro of a taiko track or, summertime, happy vibes. Whereas the second one has a much more somber vibe with the thunder. Feels maybe like it's leading into a down-tempo lo-fi track or something like that. And so definitely get creative with this. You know, if you're writing an aggressive dubstep track, maybe just go on YouTube and get some volcanoes exploding and put those in your intro and, you know, record some flames, make a bonfire in your backyard and, you know, let people know it's about to be like the hardest track of all time, right? These types of sounds are also really great for adding just a subtle amount of nice texture that sort of sits in the background of your track as a sort of ambient floor. So you'll want to find something that's fairly consistent in volume like this. I have these little fire bubbles. And what I'll do, and I pretty much do this in every track these days, honestly, is I'll drag it down to something that's barely audible, you know, maybe -30, -40 decibels. And I'll play the track without it first and then with it after. Now with it, and so it's barely audible and not something that listeners are going to notice unless they're a producer, but everyone will notice it subconsciously. And it's useful not only because it's some nice texture, but our hearing is very relative, right? So having some sort of range of, okay, this is the quietest sound in the track, this is the loudest sound, is helpful, but just by the nature of how our hearing works. And so I'll usually just Control D this over, you know, have it playing throughout the whole track. If you really like the texture, you could make it a little bit louder during the drops or have it come to the front at other points. But in general, I'll just keep it barely audible in the back, just adding a little bit of texture. You know, you'll hear lots of producers do this with things like vinyl crackle or a little bit of nice soothing white noise. But I like to use something that's in my field recording folder to add just a little bit of more character. Another interesting thing you can do with field recordings in your track is to take some of the melodic content of your track and fuse it with the field recordings or any of your ambiences. So right here, I have a fire crackling. And above this, I have a vocal atmosphere that sounds like this. And so by adding a vocoder onto the fire crackling channel, we can go to our carrier here and set external as the carrier, audio from vocal atmosphere channel. And then I'm going to mute the vocal atmosphere channel. And essentially what we're doing is sending the melodic content from that vocal atmosphere to our fire crackling so that it follows the motion of the crackles. So we'll listen back now. So essentially, as the fire crackles, as you see this transient here, you can hear the content from the vocal atmosphere coming through, right? If I go to the vocoder and set it back to 0%, it'll go back to just the fire crackling. If we want more of that vocal atmosphere, we'll boost it up. Maybe we'll go up to 70 or 80% this time. And so now we have more of the vocal atmosphere and less of the fire coming through. And so I've automated a couple other parameters here to have some ringing out and some release times be different throughout. But I've named this Angels by the Fire. And yes, you can create really cool melodic infused ambiences using this technique. Field recordings are also really great for getting very organic sounding percussive loops, right? Because you're recording a real sound from the real world. So it's going to have some nice textures automatically. And so what I did here is I recorded one day a steel spud bar against some rocks when I was doing some work at my buddy's, you know, breaking up rocks, things like that. Initially, the recording sounded like this. Right? All sorts of cool little steel hits. And so what you can do is just isolate the best pieces and sort of get little hits. Some of them you can add a little delay, a little bit of reverb. And you will automatically get rid of a lot of the background noise by just, you know, grabbing the volume here and cutting it. And you can just make your own little loops, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, little different hits, and it sounds like this. Already feeling a little bit of a techno vibe, right? I think someday I'll make a little techno track out of this, get a nice boomy kick in there. And so you can record these types of sounds all around your house. Here's one I have of hitting a knife on a piece of wood. Nice clean sound. Here's me hitting my sink with a knife. And so this is kind of, I guess this would be the hard mode if you want to spend a lot of time chopping up stuff, but it can be nice. And once you have all the one shots in your library, it's definitely nice in the future. If you want to go easy mode, and this is a technique I learned from one of our new instructors, hello Ego, welcome John. What you can do is find any sort of field recording with some good texture. Here I have some leaves and sticks I was rustling out in the woods. Sounds like this. And then we can go into the recording and press warp. And as long as we're on beats mode and we preserve transients, we can choose this singular arrow here and bring down this blue bar to make it a little bit choppier. And then in 12, we have this transform menu, right? In Live 12, you can quantize it to a grid of your choosing. I'm going to press apply. You see the yellow markers here. It's now quantized in eighths. And so we can add some drums now, and it's going to be in time with the beat. If we just solo the rustling leaves and sticks, and then with the drums. Now we're on to a few technical tips for how to get clean recordings and also how to clean up your recordings a bit. And so down here in the notepad, I have a few tips. Some of these may seem obvious, but recording as close to the source as possible is very important. And for example, I had recorded some cicadas recently in the woods, and I noticed that even by just walking into the bushes a little bit, like even like 3 or 4 feet, it did improve the quality of the recording. And so definitely get as close as possible. Take a few different takes, have one where, maybe you're right next to a little stream, another one where you're standing maybe a couple of feet away from the stream so you can compare later. But you're going to also want to make sure that you don't have any shake as well when you're recording. So, prop up your phone against something, or if you are holding it in the air and just, recording some ambiance, make sure that you're holding it as perfectly still as possible. And then if there's really bad wind, you may need to block some of the wind noise. Sometimes it sounds good in a recording if you have a little bit of soothing white noise in the back. But, if you have to use your hands or a backpack or something to block the wind, that might be a take worth doing as well. Now, if you are recording with an iPhone, you're going to be getting audio that's in mono, right? Which might be fine, but if you do want to convert it to stereo, it's pretty easy. I have a little creak here. If we just duplicate this, we could call the first channel creak left and pan it to the left. And then the second one, creak right, pan it to the right. So now we're sitting on a riverbank with a creak to our left and the right. And we'll have the second one start at a different point in the waveform. So now we have stereo water. And so for this creak, I think I already cut out some of the lows. If we just look, yeah, you can see that I've already cut out the lows because there was some recording noise and some unnecessary wind. So that's really the first step, is kind of just isolate what is the essential part of this recording. Down here I have some birds chirping out in the woods. And so usually my first move is to cut some of the lows, get rid of some of the wind noise. Actually, in this case, I kind of like how the lows sound. It sounds kind of soothing. So I might not cut it that much. But if you really want to get rid of white noise, you can use repair tools. Like right here, I have Isotope's Repair Assistant, where you can just boost the denoise. You have to be careful with these tools, though, because they can quickly reduce the quality of your recording. Another one that I like a lot is the Blue Lab Denoiser. I use this one for isolating one-shots, as I mentioned at the start of the tutorial. If you wanted to, say, find one of these bird chirps and use it as a one-shot, we could do that. So first thing to do would just be to find a part of the recording you like. Maybe we take this little chirp here. So first thing to do would be kind of just press Z, zoom in on it, and make sure you have the right part of the recording. So we can kind of just call this our initial one-shot. And now we're just going to zoom in on where the chirp is. Using EQ, we can just see right on the visualizer. I'll loop this. You can see it right there. So I'm just going to get real surgical with it. Cut some of the highs and lows around it. And so what we can do, the Blue Lab Denoiser, basically what you do is you loop a part where there's just white noise. So maybe right here we'll loop this. And then you turn on the denoiser, you press learn and unlearn. And then you can bring this threshold down to get rid of some of the noise. So I'm going to go back to our little one shot here, and we'll just kind of keep dialing it in. That sounds pretty good right there. You could then add something like reverb if you don't like the way it's ringing out right now. And, don't worry if it's perfect, because there's always going to be a little bit of background noise. As I showed you guys earlier with that Morning Dove example, this was a track I released, and if we listen to the chirp itself, there is some noise still in there, but it sounds fine. And with, when it's in a full track and there's other stuff going on around it, you'll be totally fine. What I did here is, because, a bird chirp is technically melodic, I just figured out what is the root key of it and then played a melody with it. So again, alrighty guys, that's it for today. I could definitely go on for hours about field recording. I just think it's a really great thing to get out of the studio and just start bringing all these great sounds into the DAW. The other day I was walking out of a diner and this really crazy door screeched. So I was like, boom, there's a lead. Now I have a screech lead in my library. And it's also going to inform other decisions in your production process, right? If you have an intro with, say, some water, you can start going into your synths and thinking like, okay, how can I start crafting a watery soundscape here? To me, phasers sound watery and bubbly. Maybe you record some bubbles and then, similar to how I showed you with the bird chirp, isolate that and use it as a bubble pluck melody. And so this is really, really great thing to do, because in the long term, you're going to look back and you're going to actually remember where these sounds came from and care about them. And what do we release? We release the music we care about, right? So if you have some birds chirping from Splice, that's one thing. But, if you recorded some birds on a summer's day with all your friends and family in the backyard, you're probably going to like that track that much more. So other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely leave some questions, comments down below. And also join our Mastermind community, will you? I hope to see you guys there, and see you at the next tutorial. Peace.